everybody. Hi, my name is Kelby Weaver. I'm a fine artist visiting from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I just want to first say thank you very much to Harford Community College for having me. And thank you, Jenna, for organizing this event. And thank you to everyone who's decided to show up today. And I'm here to kind of get across to you and talk about inspiration. It's something that a lot of creatives always have. It's something that we are inescapable, that we have an inescapable pull and need for. Now, if you try to force it, it doesn't always work, and sometimes you just get frustrated and you're in a bit of block. So through this talk, I'm just going to talk about some artists I'm inspired by, who they're inspired by, what they're inspired by, to kind of give us an understanding from my perspective. Obviously, everyone's inspiration is going to look different, and if your inspirations come from different sources, please continue to use those, whether they be political, whether they be from advocacy in your community, whether they be from music, contemporary or old. You know, it doesn't always have to be the same group of painters from the 19th century. Anyway, let's look at a painter from the 19th century. Hi. So, like I said, I graduated from PCAD, a Pennsylvania College of Art and Design, in 2024, and since then I have been a resident artist at the Lancaster Art Vault, a gallery and artist space that I've had the pleasure and privilege to work at and continue to grow the artist community there, while obviously continuing my practice. So, like I was saying, we're going to be talking about a bunch of old painters because that's where a lot of my inspiration derives. So I don't know if you guys know this guy, he's a little niche, but so Vincent van Gogh. If you know Vincent, I don't know if you do, but Vincent, I don't know, there's no need to lie. Vincent is probably one of the most well-recognized painters of all time, artists of all time, creators of all time, and just like everyone else, he derives his inspiration from other sources. Vincent, during his time, was inspired by the Impressionists, the Pointillists, and so many other Europeans, but also people that were his senior, like 30 years prior to his own life. So I'm going to use this painting as sort of a way to illustrate what I'm talking about. So bright saturated colors, thick paint application, but this figure, I want you to focus the sewer here. So this is not something that Vincent did on his own. He was inspired by the work of, so I apologize, this is French, Jean-Francois Millet, someone who was really interested in painting the peasant life, the hardship of that life in contrast to the bourgeoisie at the time, and Vincent really was taken by that. So a lot of his themes are of nature and the people working with nature. But obviously this sewer is very different from Vincent's choice. Vincent just being inspired doesn't mean he's being derivative. I want to make sure people understand that. Simply copying or doing a master copy isn't bad, but trying to just do what came before with nothing of your own, it's doing a disservice to everyone else viewing your work, but most of all yourself. So let's not do that. Another source of inspiration, and he's done many studies of different Japanese work. During this time, some historical context, during this time, Japan had just lifted its embargo, and art was slowly coming through the European scene. A lot of these European painters and creators and museum directors loved these woodblock prints, and Vincent was no different. What he took from it was the mastery of form and shape and outline with these bright saturated colors. But this is a woodblock print, right? And Vincent's no stranger to that, but he takes inspiration from these bright pigments, and we see it in his work. We see it, I mean, you've seen his paintings of flowers, landscapes, people, churches, whatever else. But obviously he's taken different things from these two inspirations. He, being inspired, does not directly follow it one for one. He makes it his own for his own purpose. That's what I want to get across to you guys. But here's a more contemporary example of someone I really enjoy. There's no relation. Her name is Grace Weaver. She is a contemporary oil painter who works large scale, very large scale, bigger than this wall most likely. And this is work from 5 years ago, but she still works large scale. But because I know this era of her work better, I'm going to discuss kind of the inspirations I've learned through research of, just seeing her interviews, what she's written about her work, and other people's observations on it. So as we can see, this is kind of a contemporary moment with bright saturated colors and this cartooning, this very flat space. It feels very pop art inspired. But we can also trace it back to people like Henri Matisse. Probably another super famous guy, many of you know if you're in any way interested in painting. Very important to the art world moving past the 1900s into the early and mid 20th century. But we see a similar idea here. Bright saturated colors, flat outlining, almost like a cartoon, and Grace is using it for her own purposes, her own contemporary scene. But, you know, we're kind of here to talk about my inspirations, and I'm going to kind of talk the same way that I talked about those two with my own work. I'm interested in mythology. Obviously, I love bright colors. I love the German Expressionists, the Navi, Vincent, obviously, but a bunch of other niche painters and creators of that same that era. But I also like looking into philosophy and obviously steamed into the art history. So this one I have not titled intentionally because I don't think it needs one, but it's fairly large scale. It's sitting at almost, 49 inches? 49 inches this way. I think that's almost 3 feet. We'll say almost 3 feet. And there's some interesting things here going on. There's a lone figure crouching in defiance of this heavy blue coming down upon it, and the way it's painted is as much important as what is being painted. So let me break it down for you. So, Mark Rothko. Mark Rothko is super famous for his color field paintings. These paintings where he thinly applies paint over and over and over until they feel like floating spaces that evoke three-dimensionality, but also this immense space, this weight, while also being weightless. It's pretty interesting. So during that time, I was looking at Rothko and how I wanted to take that visual heaviness to a work. Because during this time, I was also in like a more depressed state, but I was powering through it and working through it. So obviously the work is kind of representing that. In persistence of those darker times, we continue to move forward. And the philosophy I was looking at was by this French guy named Albert Camus, and his philosophy that he popularized, absurdism, and specifically his one analogy of the myth of Sisyphus. And if you don't know who Sisyphus is, he was this king from Greek mythology that was kind of a smartass. He tricked all the gods, and the gods got so fed up, when he finally died, Zeus gave him the ultimate punishment of purposelessness and made him roll a rock up a hill endlessly, and when he reached the top, it would come back down and he'd have to start all over again. And in absurdism, we use the myth of Sisyphus. They use the myth of Sisyphus to kind of get across the idea of, well, if he has that purpose and he's aware of his purpose, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. I don't 100% agree with it. I'm not one for it, but during that time, the philosophy was really interesting. I'd read a little bit about it. I'd watched some documentaries on it, and that inspired me to infuse it into the work. Literally using something like an undoable task, but you still persist through it. Not dissimilar to the Greek myth of Atlas holding up the weight of the world. So, moving on next, we actually have it in person here. This is In a Garden of Freakish Delights. So, in both name and some of the figures in the piece, I was inspired and took from a very specific source, and that is Hieronymus Bosch's In the Garden of Earthly Delights. Now, when you take inspiration, like I said, it doesn't have to be one for one. And Bosch was this highly religious guy who made religious icons that was in service of the church. I'm not really doing that. But I am taking bits and pieces of his iconography for my own composition. These bright saturated colors are being surrounded and occupied by these strange creatures that feel otherworldly, but there's a little bit of that religious iconography coming back and forth. Like, you see this large giraffe creature in my piece. There is that in the first panel, there is a large giraffe that Bosch is putting in there. So I was thinking about, okay, why don't I spin the religious iconography? The unicorn or the shepherd is kind of representative of Christ, you know? Why not put it into my piece, covering over what during that time was considered the icon of the devil, the representation of the devil being the owl. So I kind of represented that with like dark red eyes and dark blue. But ultimately, this piece was something that was inspired by that composition, but not one for one. I think I've said that enough times, so we're going to move forward. This is Dreaming of Places I'd Rather Be. This one, obviously, it's continuing the theme of the bright colors, but I'm also thinking about older painters like German expressionists and stuff that are pushing reality and wanting to push the emotion of things. So I'm literally inspired by that notion of, hey, I'm not painting reality, I'm painting something beyond reality, the things we feel. So, you know, you're thinking about being on the beach and just having a good time with a bunch of other like-minded nude people, you know? But in semi-serious, it's kind of also calling back to the pastoral, which is like a famous, not famous, well yeah, it is famous, what am I saying? It's famous and well-documented motif that multiple painters and creators have used to kind of represent man working with nature and becoming one and working in tandem. So I thought that was a cool thing to bring into it as well. But I was also specifically inspired by the group of painters from the early 1900s. I keep wanting to say 21st century, it's not, it's the 20th century, so I'm gonna just opt to say 1900s. The Nabi, a group of people who believed the use of these brighter and more saturated colors was a way to transcend reality and bring back the spirituality that art had been occupied with. Moving forward, it's a self-portrait of me in a raincoat. And a lot of the inspiration here can be tied to the history of portraiture and, you know, confronting the viewer with yourself if it's a self-portrait. But I'm also super interested in the work of a specific artist. His name was Chaim Soutine. And if you notice in my work, there's some warbling, there's some sort of warping of both form. Like there's a certain reality to it, but it's not, and I'm not going for realism. I'm not really attuned to it. I don't really see it as important to this work. But I'm also interested in Cézanne and his specific way of muting colors to create this atmospheric perspective that is untraditional for his time. So I was inspired by these two different artists for two different reasons, and I kind of mishmashed them, made like a Frankenstein monster for my own purposes to make a composition and piece that is now representative of not only me, but my interests. This is Sunset Road, and this is kind of not a departure, but I just wanted to make a sort of a statement here. Right now I'm really interested in the geometry and space of roads and how we occupy and commute it every single day of our lives. I'm inspired by it. See what I did there? So, what I mean is, I think we take for granted how much time, especially as Americans, we spend on the road. In our cars, getting to point A to point B, whether it be to work, whether it be for a road trip, whether it be for a vacation. And for all of it, our visual landscape is dominated by these man-made things like the road, the power lines, and how they interact with nature. And I think for the longest time, nature was always the focus of landscapes, with some human dwellings here or there. But I think especially in our contemporary moment, I'm really fascinated in that energy that we see. Because the way power lines have to work is that they have to flow. The way we're moving on the road, you have to flow, you have to keep moving. So I'm inspired by that, but also the painting styles of a lot of people who were really interested in these fat globs of energetic paint that do a lot of work outside of like realistic rendering. Another example, a more recent example, this is Autumn Road. I'm putting energy and excitement in the clouds, I'm putting it in the power lines, the traffic signs. These are all things that are man-made, but as we're driving by, we're just moving through it. And again, I'm also interested in Soutine for these. Soutine is not interested in one-for-one reality. He wants to show these immense places. He wants to show the buildings and the landscapes moving and warbling, and obviously I don't know what he was thinking, but from my perspective as someone being inspired by this, I took this visual way of depicting landscape, and I wanted to convey my own interest, as I expressed, about the geometry, the energy, and our place with this contemporary moment with power lines and the mass amount of roads. Another example, Road Home, Lemon Street View. Sorry, I stayed on that too little. But in an effort not to repeat myself, kind of the same verse, same as second verse, same as the first. Just really interested in those ideas and making these images, these compositions complete, using all the tools of an image-making process together. Sometimes that means scraping up the paint. Sometimes you're interested in using the underglow in effective ways. is similar to this, using the underpaintings pink to electrify the surface and potentially bring the viewer in to then maybe see, oh, what's this abstract, what's this weird globby moment happening? But slowly the pieces of a road and a street start to come together. And I like that idea. Like, you at first are kind of tricked into believing, oh, this is just a simple abstract. Kind of what I was interested in with Soutine, this precursor to what would become American abstract expressionism. I'm taking and putting in a different context, my context. But also, in terms of color and this monumentality and the way of putting the composition together, structurally, I'm interested in Munch, especially his later work. Edvard Munch, if you guys don't know, very famous for the Scream, you know, a lot of scarier work, darker, but later in life, for the majority of his life, he makes these endlessly beautiful and large amounts of colorful landscapes of the place he grew up and lived towards the end of his life. And there's a certain amount of tenderness that I took a lot of inspiration from when depicting these spaces, but also seeing how he depicts these spaces with paint. He's not concerned with covering the whole canvas. He's not concerned with colors being from reality. He's pushing them to his level of comfort to express and show his love for the place. And what can I say? I'm inspired. And this is another recent piece where I'm kind of bringing all those ideas together. A place that I commute every day in Lancaster before I get to the Art Vault. And, you know, it's not a one-for-one, it's not a photograph. I'm not inspired by photographs in that way. I wanted to construct and make this space something similar to what is there, something that feels like the spirit of that place, but is also a competent painting and an enjoyable composition for the viewer. Auerbach is a great inspiration that I've recently revisited. I don't have any Auerbach books. I have a lot of books out here over there that I didn't hand them out. But anyway, Auerbach loves that thick physicality, the materiality of the paint, and that is what I love too. His are, sometimes they border near unrecognizable to anything in reality. I'm not super interested in that, I'm not super inspired by that, but I'm interested and inspired by when he depicts reality with those thick moments, and those moments where he's scraping away and putting back on. To kind of speak to my inspiration of mythology, I'll tell you a little bit of a story about Minotaur. During this time, I was kind of coming to grips with myself and like the negative aspects of herself. Because everyone has negative aspects of herself that we try to hide. I think, I don't want to misquote, but there's like the id and the ego, and there's like the darker self, the passenger. I wanted to depict in this piece by using the myth of the Minotaur, because in my head, I re-evaluated that story as a creature that was made due to his environment. Being neglected by the king that saw him as a monster, and the only food given to him were people. Of course, he became a cannibal. You gave him the worst possible ability to not become a monster. No, he would become a monster. So in this piece, I'm trying to use that to say, well, the Minotaur within us, if we confront and we meet ourselves there and accept it, we are going to find that peace we're looking for, instead of giving into the monster or trying to kill the monster as Perseus does in the myth. So obviously it's not a one-for-one. I'm not trying to recreate the myth of the Minotaur, but there are like little motifs and hints from the legend, like the golden thread being tied to both the central figure and the Minotaur. So obviously. Color-wise, Kirchner is a huge inspiration. I have a German expressionist book. I think I've flagged so many of his paintings early and later on. But the German expressionist, as I've said multiple times throughout this talk, is an endless source of inspiration. If I am having a hard time coming up with a color complement or contrast, they've usually solved it, or they got really damn close and I can take it from there. And it's no different with Kirchner specifically. And this is kind of towards the end of the talk. I found like these funny things that were kind of inspired by other things or took from other things that aren't fully painted. Like, they're not paintings, like as I've been talking about this entire talk, because that's what I'm primarily interested in. So, A Bug's Life and the Magnificent Seven. A Pixar film and an old Western. What do they have in common? they're both inspired by an older Japanese film called The Seven Samurai, which I have watched. It's pretty great. In terms of like characterization and plot structure, these two movies take from this movie. And I thought that was just, it goes to show. You can be inspired by a lot of things and you can create something very different in tone. Second, I wanted to talk about the idea of like covers in music and like master copies in painting. I think you can make them your own. I think we've been given many examples throughout history that you can do it. I'm using one that I'm more familiar with. All Along the Watchtower is one of my all-time favorite songs by Jimi Hendrix. But up until like a few years ago, I did not know Bob Dylan was the originator of it. And it's pretty great, but I agree with Bob where I think Jimmy made it his own and he took it to the next level. So needless to say, you can be inspired and you can make something or cover something. Just make it your own. And Tyler the Creator is a more contemporary rap artist that I like, hip hop, but he has a lot of different interests. A lot of them are like hip hop artists that he takes inspiration from, but there's also like a lot of funk, R&B from the 70s and 80s. There's very strange, like, I read and then watched in this interview, he discussed this process. I usually spend an hour every morning listening to music I've never listened to before from all over the world. And I was like, what a great way to get inspired. What a great way to find those things that you can bring into your own work to make your own or to work on top of. And that's what I love about like rap artists and people who are DJing. They have to mix and match these different things to create something new and fantastic. And I think all of us, no matter what our creative venture is, as a painter, printmaker, even a gallery curator, or you're a culinary expert, you can remix, you can take inspiration from something else and try something new. It adds something new. Part of your story is brought into it, and I think that is like one of the most important things as a creative you can do. You are continuing this long legacy that humans have done, which is you make something that you're taking inspiration from, and then someone further down the line sees what you've done. It's like a language, it's like a dialogue that we're having with people of the past and are present for the people in the future. And I hope through my yammering on through this talk, I've kind of illustrated my excitement about that, and maybe you can question yourself and your curiosity in things to take you down that rabbit hole, to make more things. But I think that is the end of the talk, and if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer yours.
Yeah, thank you. I think you did a really good job of explaining how when you take inspiration from a lot of different places, it ends up being something fresh and new. And so my question isn't real, and I like what you said at the end about it being a pay it forward system of creativity that we're all participating in. Like, I was inspired by them, so I can inspire somebody in the future. So, but my question is kind of unrelated to that. It's more about your work. Is there any relationship between your interest in mythology and your interest in landscapes, or do you see those as like separate interests or like artistic endeavors?
I don't. I think I used to. I think I used to see as each like different motif or interest that I paint or decide to create from as separate. But there's a lot more fluidity to it in my mind now, especially with the way I work. Similar color palettes may appear, or a way of painting texturally may appear. Maybe I'm using new palettes and stuff. There's a lot of there's a lot of crossbreeding of ideas and ways of working. Yes.
So I noticed, so when you talk about your inspirations, you can definitely see it. Like when you were going back and forth between your work and then like what inspired you, I was like, oh, I can totally see where you're getting the colors, the like thickness. Do you feel because you were at the Vault and you're surrounded by other artists who are a lot like in kind of a similar place as you, do you feel like that also inspires you a lot? Because I feel like when I like look around, I can also see like people getting inspired by you there, and like I don't know, I see, yeah.
Oh, definitely. I maybe touched on this in the beginning a little bit, but I think my time at the Vault with like-minded younger artists who are just starting out has been indispensable. It has been really great. I've made a great number of friends and colleagues who can rip apart my work in an affectionate way to get across what can be better, but also encourage me to look into things and do these other things that would make the piece stronger or push me in the direction of a show I should apply to, and you know, have my stuff out there. But to answer your question fully, I think I've inspired them as much as they inspire me, and the pay it forward idea, it keeps going on and on. That's the important thing about an artist community, is you continue to expand, you'll continue to meet those people that will challenge and give you the tools to make your work better. So for the new arrivals, do you have any questions? Yeah.
Can you restart?
I think if you guys want to talk about it after, I can clearly go through the whole thing again.
Yeah.
But I again want to just thank everyone here. And before I do the end part of the speech, no more questions?
One more for you.
Okay.
Do you have, because I feel like you've been really like hammering out pieces, especially being around so many other like-minded artists, are you finding like any new inspirations, or did you put them all like, what we've seen is what it is, or are you finding more as?
I'm finding more and more.
That's what I figured.
So I think I kind of touched on it. There's this rabbit hole that comes, it is birthed through your curiosity in one thing. I am interested in Vincent, and Vincent leads me to the guys he's inspired by. And those guys who were inspired may lead me to guys and gals and things that I didn't know, like entire political movements and religious sects and cults that existed at that time that interest me. It isn't just I'm looking at one painter and it expands the tree out. It is looking at their what was contemporary to them, their contemporary moment, relating it to my own, and seeing what was happening. Like history and as much as the present all affect that.
In that sense, do you think curiosity is a key characteristic an artist should have?
Absolutely. If you want to get any inspiration, like if there's anything I could tell you, stay curious, stay interested in things. Even, that doesn't mean you go to the library and stick your nose in books. If that's your deal, that's fine. But that means, for me, as I was talking about before, when I'm on the road all the time, I took a moment and I was curious, and I thought, I had a thought. I was like, wow, we spend a lot of time out here, and that realm, that way of thinking led me to my interest in the roadscapes, the landscapes that walk the road. And it made me think about like specifically this country and how much of it is now been covered in these roads, these interstates, these highways. You know, as much as I love potholes as much as the next guy, but the failure of infrastructure in some places. It's a rabbit hole that leads us to other questions in an endless pursuit that we may never get full answers to, but that's the exciting part of being a painter, a writer, a creator, a person.
So are you okay, so like with the road ones, because I had a similar thought. I have done road ones where I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wow, I'm driving to Peacat every day for hours. Like, this is getting to be a lot. And so there are going to be people who have similar thoughts, but I do think some people could take that as like an environmentalist thing as well. Are you okay with people taking it like out of a different context? Like if they look at it and they're like, wow, like I'm taking this in a way, like there's a ton of roads, a ton of like man-made stuff around us.
I think for those pieces specifically, there's enough. It isn't like my mythology pieces. There is a slight separation, but like there is crossover, there is also the more open nature of a landscape or a still life. The objects in a still life could convey different things, just like the things I decide to paint in a roadscape could convey different things. If I'm painting the well-off manner of someone who has way more money than what they're worth, or what they know what to do with, I should say. It's different than me going down to Kensington and Philadelphia and doing a portrait of someone there. It tells two different stories, but specifically for my roadscapes, I am more than okay with people having an open-ended approach. And if it leads to a further dialogue and curiosity, I think it's done a great job.
Yeah, I really like the road ones a lot.
Yeah.
They're really cool.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate it.
On that note, so it's interesting that some of your work, you're inspired by these like very great artists and these great myths and legends, and the other part of your work is the mundanity of these roadscapes. Is there anything else you have found about the mundane everyday to be very inspiring besides roads?
I think it's corny. It's like the friends we made along the way.
Yeah.
But the different personalities of the certain amount of people we meet in life and the connections we make or the connections we break throughout that is just as important. I think there's an entire group of paintings and works and writings that are about loss and pain as much as there is about love and connection. So I think the mundanity of life also is something that can elevate our own personal experience beyond it. Like, it's hard for me to articulate that, and I think there's been thousands of years of people trying to articulate it, and I'm not going to be able to.
You're not the first
I'm not the
artist.
guy.
No,
I'm
in the
not that
canon,
guy.
no.
And then
Sorry.
this ties back into the philosophy of where you're
Yeah.
interested in that, and this
Yeah.
ties it like back all together.
It's-
So
Yeah.
All these things are interwoven and connected, and that's what allows inspiration to be made.
Yeah.
That further expansion of your curiosity into things you may have not considered before. An open mind is a great thing and a wonderful tool. But I think we are good, and I want to thank all of you for being here for the entire talk and listening to me. And I am so happy that you all listened.
Thank you, Kelby.